life cycle from strategy to implementation. This means we help companies make sense of their data and help data teams change the way they work with data so that our clients are equipped to solve complex business problems and transform the way they do business. On the call today, we have an awesome lineup of speakers. They're each bringing their great perspectives and expertise from data engineering work and DBT work. First, we have John Barczewski. He's a data engineering consultant based out of our Madison office. We have Aaron Barnier, a data engineering consultant based out of our Chicago office. Tyler Rouse, a data engineering consultant based out of Minneapolis. Jordan Veal, a data engineering consultant based out of Denver. And we also have Ryan McGibbony joining us today from our tech partner, DBT. So like I said before, please drop your questions in the Q&A and we'll get them answered for you. But I think it's time to get started. You ready, John?
Ready. Thank you for the intro. So the three main topics we will discuss today include an overview of DBT and what it can do for your data team, how DBT fits into the modern data stack, so the ecosystem surrounding DBT that Tyler will get into, and lastly, stories from our speakers on real pain points that DBT has solved. So with that, I'll pass it to Ryan, our partnership manager from DBT Labs, to give an overview of DBT.
All right, thanks, John. My name is Ryan. I'm here from DBT Labs, like John and Jennifer mentioned. We're the creators and maintainers of DBT software, and appreciate Analytics 8 having me as a guest today for the presentation. So I'm here just to talk very quickly and give a high-level introduction to what DBT does. So what I have here on the screen is a very oversimplified diagram of the ELT paradigm for working with data. So extract, load, transform. And the first thing to note is that DBT is performing the T, handling the T, the transformation in the ELT process. So what you see here is from left to right, you've got a jumble of raw data sources, this mix of different bubbles there. You've got some process for extracting those data from those source systems, loading it into a data platform, and then you need to transform, make that data usable in the organization. So DBT is pairing with whatever data platform or database you're using, and it's going to provide a framework to develop data pipelines, test and document them, and then deploy them so that the resulting data is, again, useful to the organization for making decisions. So feeding into business intelligence tools, machine learning models maybe, or other use cases in the organization. And I won't get into the technical features of DBT, but what I want to emphasize is that what I think is most powerful about the framework is the workflow that it enables and the way it kind of democratizes data pipeline development. So more people in different data roles can participate in that process and do that in a way that's manageable, scalable, and robust. And so even though part of the power of DBT is its accessibility, like any new tool that's being adopted in an organization, it's valuable to have a trusted and experienced advisor for the initial implementation of that tool. And so that's why it's important to us at DBT Labs to work with a partner like Analytics 8 that has a team like this that's developed expertise with the DBT framework. And what they'll do next, the rest of the speakers here, is illustrate that expertise to you by talking about some of the real business pain points that they've solved for clients using DBT. So thanks again for having me here, and I'll pass back to John and the team.
Thank you, Ryan. So let's talk about why we started using DBT here at Analytics 8. So I joined a little over 2 years ago, and there was a high level of interest from our customers in all these new powerful cloud platforms. So I honestly think I couldn't have timed it better. It was awesome. I could jump in and have a lot of fun because storage and compute were now more scalable than we'd ever seen before, but there is still a large gap in having a solid transformation framework to put on top of these platforms. So that's where DBT came in and filled this gap. Also, since DBT is cloud agnostic, it naturally fit into a ton of our use cases since we are both cloud and tool agnostic. So it fit with a lot of customers, but a point I want to emphasize is there obviously were competitors. It wasn't like DBT was a standalone tool, but a few of the additional many reasons I and Analytics 8 fell in love with DBT include that they have an awesome community. I think it's over 30,000 members now, which is insane from how much it's grown. Their transformations are centered around code. Specifically, they leverage the power of SQL, which I'll highlight a little more in detail in a sec. It's an open source project, which allows you to take advantage of innovation and flexibility. So there's no vendor lock-in that you have to deal with. It gives you maximal ability to move around. And it's very feature rich, which this presentation highlights during our pain point section, and we'll get into the details there. But from this list, I specifically would like to highlight that DBT really leverages the power of SQL. Many people underestimate the problems you can solve using SQL. And DBT has been at the forefront of this movement by opening the door to more individuals on your data team to get involved in transformation. So this is a movement of data democratization, and it's been a very exciting concept to be a part of and realize and grow with our clients. So our quick background with DBT. Let's hear from Aaron on the business value that DBT brings to the table.
Thanks, John. As he mentioned, I would like to touch on the business value of DBT. First, it's a SQL-based tool, which John mentioned. It allows anyone who knows SQL to build transformations in the data warehouse. This simplifies the hiring process in a very competitive market. Secondly, the pricing model for DBT Cloud is low cost, with DBT Core being free. Another point is that DBT's framework to develop like software engineers has shown an increase in velocity for development changes. Updated code can get pushed to production more quickly, which means the BI team is getting what they need sooner and the business is getting that data and analysis faster. Lastly, DBT has many built-in data quality features that are easy to incorporate in order to ensure the stability of your reporting process. DBT not only provides a value directly to developers who use the tool, which we'll touch on later, but as you can see, it brings value to the rest of the business. With that, I'll pass it to Tyler to discuss how DBT fits into the modern data stack.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I'll speak a little bit about the modern data stack in a moment and some of the tools that have grown up around DBT. But I first want to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the experiences, some of the things you're going to work with as you start your first DBT project, and some of the core features that really make DBT what it is today. And so first, I want to just talk about the centralization and organization aspects of DBT. So DBT really is just a project-based way of organizing your transformation code on your data platform or your data warehouse. And this is important because this allows you to check all of this code into Git. It allows you to version control like software developers, but it also gives you the ability to collaborate with different stakeholders, could be even different departments, on one place working with the same transformation code. In bigger organizations, we start talking about a little bit data mesh. You could see multiple DBT projects being stood up for each department. But the important thing to understand here is that there's a real collaboration aspect to DBT that's not just technology based. This is more just from a workflow perspective and something that Ryan touched on a little bit earlier. But this is the important aspect of DBT. And so just to lay a couple, background context points around what's going to happen when you start your first DBT project. A few things you're going to run into are DBT models, which are really just select statements. Select statements generate views, tables, materialized views within your data warehouse or data platform. And this really makes it simple for analysts and your BI developers to onboard and begin developing within your data pipelines. And so a couple other features that DBT brings to the table to empower your analysts is orchestration. So as you develop these DBT models, you can actually build lineage and references back to layers in in your data warehouse. And so what you're seeing in this diagram here is that you may be landing data in your data warehouse in a staging layer, performing some transformations and then some final transformations as you load your data into a final data mart, or however you're modeling your data. And this is important because you're able to build lineage, you're able to test how changes further down in your layers affect your data marts at the end for your end users. A few other things to highlight is that documentation is right at your fingertips. DBT uses a documentation language called YAML, if you're familiar with it, to document your schemas and your columns, as well as building in tests. So you can actually test columns and schemas within your data as it's moving through these transformation steps. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it allows you to version control. You're checking this into your favorite Git provider, whatever that may be, and it allows your team to develop concurrently. A final thing to note is that DBT connects to numerous data platforms. You're seeing a few here, but adapters are all open source and community driven. We can definitely get resources at the end of this out to folks who are here today to understand what other adapters are available, what other databases you can connect to. And so with that, I want to jump into just talking a little bit about the ecosystem that DBT is surrounded by. So John mentioned their Slack community is over 30,000 people strong of just data practitioners, people who are working with data every day. And really DBT has been the center of the universe of tools that have grown up around it in what is coined the modern data stack. A few things to highlight here could be ETL tools. So perhaps you're using some sort of ETL tool to load data or sync data from source systems. A lot of these tools and some that you're seeing here have the ability to integrate with DBT and actually run your DBT models or your DBT cloud jobs right in succession with that extract and load. On the reverse side, we have reverse ETL. So you may be using a tool that helps activate your data, taking data from your data warehouse and piping it back into something where your data is providing value, likely back into a source system where you have operational business users working with data coming from your data warehouse. And then there's some other ancillary things like data monitoring. There's some tools that integrate with your DBT documentation and bring in things like machine learning and anomaly detection around data and how your DBT models are changing over time, as well as integrating their own testing suites as well. And then for the more advanced data teams, we have orchestration. So if you're using things like Prefect or Airflow or Dagster, and you have your machine learning team also collaborating on your data platform, all these tools come with both DBT Cloud and just DBT command line adapters, if you will, that allow you to run DBT models right through these tools. And this is all important because this keeps all of your transformation code within one code repository, but it allows other tools to be able to run these transformations in part of whatever process you're trying to perform. So that's the main key here. Really, the main thing to highlight here is that you can pick your favorite tool to do each part of the stack as you see fit. And so with that, we're going to transition into some of the pain points that we've experienced. For me personally, is actually experienced as a data analyst myself. And sometimes when I wish I had DBT as part of our data stack. But with that, I will kick it over to Jordan to kick us off.
Thanks, Tyler. And thanks again to everyone that's joining us today. So now we've seen a little bit about how DBT can fit into your data stack and about why it's one of our favorite tools to use. So we're going to jump into some of the pain points and what we've seen as developers and how DBT has made our lives easier. So first, often we'll see organizations. We go into we take a view of their environment, and we notice that you might have analysts that require access to data in a separate business unit, and because of some of the bottlenecks in place, they're not able to get to that data. So for instance, imagine you're an HR analyst and maybe you need some marketing data for an analysis you're working on. So in a typical enterprise data environment, that might require you reaching out to the engineering team within marketing. They're going to have to build that model for you and then figure out how to deliver it to you on a regular basis. Maybe the marketing team is low on resources. You have to get into a queue, and you're not going to see that data set for a long while. Maybe by the time you do, it's not even relevant anymore. And furthermore, maybe the system you're working in isn't SQL based, and so you're not even able to harness the full capabilities of that system because, if you're an analyst that lives in SQL, then that's what you know. So, per this example, you can see how data silos will lead to unnecessary bottlenecks for data teams. Analysts are often dependent upon resources that are beyond their control. They'll operate in isolation. There's no centralized source for business logic. They may end up rewriting previously developed analyses or building like but different measures and KPIs. And they might have a similar name, but the logic behind them is inconsistent, and that can really cause major problems downstream when you're trying to communicate your results to stakeholders within your organization. So oftentimes with these silos, we see analysts operating in knowledge vacuums, and it makes it really difficult to paint a cohesive picture of their full data environment. So with that in mind, how does DBT come in and help alleviate those pain points that we see around data silos? So DBT helps reduce data silos by acting as a centralized location for all of your transformation logic and enabling any analyst with SQL skills to create models and leverage data across business units. So to gain access to DBT, you just need to set up a developer account, get access as needed, and away you can go developing in SQL. So the user handles the business logic, and DBT does all the rest, which is a great feature. As a user, you don't have to understand DDL commands, table creation, view alteration, etc. You execute a run command from with DBT, or there's a couple other commands as well, and then that takes care of building those models on your database. So in addition to that, each developer is working within their own environment. They can execute a command that's going to build that model that they're working on in their own development schema, and so they can do testing and QA as needed without really having to worry about impacting the production environment. So with all that in mind, I can see there being some concerns around granting all this access to data teams. And so how do we maintain the data integrity and a stable production environment? Because that's, of course, key to business operations. So in addition to unlocking the power of SQL, DBT also offers native version control via integration with GitHub, GitLab, or Azure DevOps. And that enables data teams to work in tandem with each other without fear of incompatible code breaking production. So this version control is really easy to set up. You can use an analyst's personal Git account, but then the organization's repository is controlled by an admin. All code modifications are logged into the repository. You have documentation around every change, pull requests, and commit. And analysts are able to push models for review, but there's a lot of checks and balances to prevent those from ever getting into production until it's been confirmed that they're compatible with the existing code base. So all that to say, you can have a lot of different users, but there's this peace of mind knowing that if you ever needed to roll back to a stable state, that's possible. And there's a lot of documentation around all these changes that are being made to your environment. So yeah, with that in mind, we're going to talk about some of the other core features of DBT. One of those is the native documentation that it offers to its users. And so I'm going to pass it off to Tyler to talk a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I'm going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, but is usually the thing that most people don't enjoy doing. And that is knowledge sharing and documentation, something that generally takes a back seat in a lot of development, but we're going to go from process of developing to now documenting what we've just developed. And so if you go to the next slide, John, let's talk a little bit about the data analyst role and why you might want to bring data analysts, also BI developers, into your data pipeline development. So first, let's talk about a little bit about what that role is. So generally, data analysts, BI developers, BI engineers, whatever your organization may call them, these are the people who are working most closely with the business. These are the people who are sourcing requirements for building dashboards and reports. This could be, going all the way up to VP C-suite level within your organization, helping answer questions with your data team's data. And so this role is really important for your data team because this is where a lot of trust gets built. These analysts, a core part of their skill set is usually on the softer side and being able to build relationships with the business and helping to generate more investment, more headcount within your data team, more reasons to invest in your data team. And so something that commonly happens in my experience as data analyst can be what happened, how do I build institutional knowledge around how data pipelines and how data is moving through our data pipelines, how data pipelines are built and how data is moving through them. And so let's talk a little bit about documentation, because this is usually a core piece of how folks on data teams are able to absorb this kind of knowledge. And everybody does documentation differently. Pre-DBT, your documentation may be embedded into ETL tools in some way. It could be in a Confluence site of some sort, and organization could be well organized or it could not be. But this is somewhat decentralized and away from where actual data transformation is happening. Or it could even be things like rogue Excel spreadsheets of metadata on data pipelines, or Word documents. I've really seen it all in my experience, but some of the core pieces of DBT that it brings to the table is this documentation feature around how your data is being transformed. And this really, the power of what DBT is bringing here comes to bubbles to the surface, I guess, if you will, when source systems change. And so if we talk about what happens when source systems change from a data analyst perspective, you can go to the next slide, John. Ultimately, you have to understand, and this could be schema changes to your source systems. This could be actual just large data loads. Perhaps you're uploading a bunch of CSVs to your CRM system, and now this is flowing through to your data warehouse. A lot of times what can happen is business users end up seeing or knowing about these changes and are awaiting them to come through in a dashboard after you've performed some sort of value add through your built data models. And what can happen is business users begin to find issues, or they find cracks, problems with the data as it's flowing, and they start to ask questions. And usually it is the data analyst who is the one fielding these questions first. And as a data analyst, the things that you end up having to go do if you don't have this knowledge could be searching through documentation. This could also be tracking down ownership of who owns the ETL logic of how data is flowing through. But all of this ends up centering around what are the downstream dependencies when a source system changes of all of my views and tables and data marts, and how can we adjust all of these things to support this change in that source system. And so a few other things to note about this process is that ultimately what can happen is if you can't come up with answers really quickly about why data is broken or wrong, you end up finding yourself losing trust. Your data team loses trust with the business. The business just feels that you're not, doing a great job. And a lot of times, and especially as the case with me, data analysts begin to find workarounds. You begin to want to build up that engineering skill set so you can build up that knowledge around how data is moving through your data platform so that you can answer these questions for the business. And so if we start to talk about how DBT can solve some of these issues, we'll see a little bit of a GIF here in the next slide around some of the features that DBT brings with DBT Docs. So DBT Docs is really a way to document your DBT models, which again are just select statements. And really what we're doing here is just giving a way for your business users as well as data analysts to be able to see how data is being transformed, what SQL is being ran, without actually having to go into these systems and view code. And this is really important because this allows to build trust with not just your data analysts, but also with your business users as well, and really builds a shared understanding of what your data lineage is. A few things to highlight here is what you can do is you can document your source system. So as data is landing in your data platform, you can see the lineage, and you'll see it kind of in this blue background feature here in DBT's documentation. But you can see how a source system flows into all of your downstream models so that you can determine if the source system is changing, what are all the things we have to change downstream to ensure that there are no issues with our data. And so this is really important for your data team to build trust. A few things to note here as well is that DBT allows your business users to just have access to this cloud hosted documentation. You can also just host this in cloud storage if that's something you would like to do via a deployment pipeline. But all of this is really good for building trust. I can't harp on trust enough. It's all about building a really good data culture within your organization, and documentation is just a core piece of that. And so another final thing to highlight is that data tests actually get documented here. It might be too fast to be able to actually see it, but you'll be able to see what tests are happening on columns and schemas. Your business users can then validate if tests are actually working correctly or not in downstream dashboards. But with that, I will kick it over to John to talk a little bit about the out-of-the-box data testing functionality that DBT comes with.
Thank you, Tyler. So the situation I want to talk through is when data pipeline issues are discovered late. So at a previous client of mine, the environment had no automated testing, so it caused a lot of problems. So a common situation was that a business user, normally someone higher up, would find that data is either stale or incorrect in their reporting, and there'd be a lot of fire drills. So the environment was very fragile and hectic, and there's more of a reactive approach versus a proactive approach of having notifications when something breaks down. This is a common theme I've seen throughout the industry because it can get pretty complicated to build this sort of system yourself. On this project, we integrated DBT and applied their built-in testing, which includes source freshness, singular and generic tests, and then also leverage that DBT Cloud offers a way to notify you when something breaks when you're orchestrating your job. So this worked extremely well to uncover issues early. There's multiple times that come to mind when I would log on, something was broken, and we had time to fix it before impacting actual reporting for the day. So I'm not going to say there aren't more robust testing solutions you could apply in your process, but DBT offers a very simple and effective way to ensure stability on day one for your project. And I would make the argument that it handles most of what most companies need. There's always going to be edge cases out there, but from my experience on my projects, this checks all the boxes. So going off that, as far as configuring these tests that I just mentioned, it's extremely simple. So source freshness and generic tests are both defined in YAML files within your project, while singular tests are written in a SQL statement that's stored in the test directory of your project. If rows are returned from any of the queries, a test would fail. It's very simple and intuitive for anyone to set up, and DBT is handling all the heavy lifting for us behind the scenes, so we don't have to worry about it. So as far as seeing this in action, here's two quick examples. The bottom left would be a source freshness dashboard or a visualization, if you will, on all the things you configure. There's one spot to look at how fresh all your data is. This is really nice. And then the bottom right would be an email notification that you can configure for the jobs in your pipeline. So you can have it send you emails when your job succeeds, is ran, or fails, whatever really fits your use case. And it's really nice because it informs you on the data quality in your pipeline. So in closing, tests provide a great way to monitor your data pipeline, and they've been really critical on our projects. With that, I'll hand it off to Aaron to talk about how continuous integration brings all the pieces we just talked about together.
Thanks, John. As he mentioned, I'll be talking about some pain points I've experienced with deploying data pipelines. I've worked with many other transformation tools where we had to develop and maintain a self-hosted continuous integration, continuous delivery and deployment, or for short, CI/CD pipeline. It took a significant amount of time to plan, develop, and maintain these pipelines. And oftentimes we were running into issues when the team, data, or code base started to change or scale, and the technology was changing. We were noticing that stakeholders were pushing for faster iteration. There was growing data and source code volumes and an increasing involvement of non-data team committers, which strained the self-hosted CI/CD pipelines. Pushes to production were often delayed and sometimes would break dependent tables on the next production job run, which meant stale data. This is where DBT comes in. DBT has built-in CI/CD features that require minimal to no development and maintenance. It's easy to configure and constantly being improved as the technology changes. DBT Cloud integrates with Git providers like GitHub so that you have automated checks that run and test your data when you open a pull request. Using webhooks or APIs, a DBT Cloud CI job is kicked off with Slim CI, which runs only the models that are impacted by this change code. This includes the model that you changed and the downstream dependencies as well. This is easily done because of the lineage that is defined when developing in DBT, which Tyler touched on. The tests that John talked about can also be run in your CI jobs, which give you further confidence that the changes you are making will not break your production jobs or any reporting, and the data maintains its high quality. A couple other features I want to highlight is that it is a serverless infrastructure. Everything is configured in DBT Cloud and run in your data warehouse. Additionally, there are some other cool tools that DBT integrates with. One example that I personally used is SQL Fluff, which is a SQL linter that can integrate with DBT Cloud so that the SQL code is being pushed to production follows a certain format. This is extremely beneficial for growing teams or large teams, as it can be hard to maintain that consistency in format for the code. On the next slide, you'll see on the left-hand side is how DBT's lineage works. As mentioned with Slim CI, you can run only the code that changed along with downstream dependencies, which is what significantly improves runtimes. On the right side is an example of the integration with GitHub on a pull request. As you can see, this project has the DBT Cloud Check, which is your Slim CI job run in DBT, as well as other integrations like SQL Fluff that lints your code. With these features and the others that I talked about, your team doesn't need to worry about developing and maintaining a CI/CD pipeline. You can significantly speed up the process and get your code to production faster and with confidence, which means that as your team and code base grows, you don't have to worry about scalability of a self-hosted CI/CD pipeline. With that, I'll pass it off to John to summarize the key takeaways.
Thank you, Erin. So in closing, I want to reiterate a few of our key points from the presentation. So first, DBT sits on top of your data warehouse and offers flexibility to your data stack. So many tools, like Tyler showed, have been made to integrate with DBT, and this allows you to pick and choose what works best for you. This is super popular because you don't have to have a one-size-fits-all approach here. You can choose the microservices that work best for your use cases. Second, DBT is SQL-based and very easy to pick up. This offers a very unique opportunity to unite your team further and have analysts and engineers work more closely together. As I mentioned earlier, there's a large community of passionate users to collaborate with. Their Slack community is unmatched by anything myself or any of us have seen. It's really insane. We really love it. So very thankful for that. And as we showed during the pain point section, there's a lot of robust features DBT comes with that'll help you with your development, documentation, testing, and continuous integration. So these have proven extremely effective at solving problems on our projects, and I'm sure it could be similar for yours. So if anything we mentioned today resonated with you, I would highly recommend checking DBT out. And on that note, DBT is really simple to try. So we have 3 main steps we recommend to get started with DBT. First would be to create a 14-day DBT Teams trial account. That'll get you all the access you need to understand DBT Cloud as a product. And then second, taking the DBT fundamentals course will give you the basics of DBT on fake data before you plug your real data in. It's good to do this. It's about a 5-hour commitment, and it'll show you the ropes so you know what you're doing when you jump in. And lastly, I've said it a lot at this point, but you should join DBT Slack. They offer an outstanding community. A good comparison we often hear is it's like Stack Overflow for DBT. I can promise you it is that, but it's so much more. So please check it out and see what you think. With that, we're open for any questions anyone has. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're happy to answer any questions that you guys have at this time. We actually don't have any at the moment, but I encourage you to drop them in now. It's really not too late. I was going to ask somebody from the Analytics 8 team, and maybe Ryan, you can also chip in too while we wait to see if anybody has questions. We get this question a lot from clients about DBT, or actually any technology that we're implementing really, is how can they ensure that they're set up for long-term success? So like, is there an aspect of the DBT project that is the most important to get right to make sure that they're getting most from their investment? Like, is there a single thing or a couple things that you could expound on for us?
Was that for anyone?
Go for it, John.
Okay. Thank you. So what comes to mind for us, what I think really sets us apart is our modeling. So we use a tiered architecture. So we have a staging layer, transformation layer, and a MART layer. Typically, it all depends on the use case. I'm not saying that's the one size that meets every business, but having a structured approach like that means you can answer questions into the future based off what you've built. We've seen a lot of projects where someone might build a pipeline to answer one KPI, and then the definition changes and you need to build something completely new. So that's something that we found really valuable on all of our projects, and our customers really appreciate it.
Ryan, do you have anything to add on to that?
Sure. What comes to mind for me is, DBT has a lot built into the design of the tool to encourage these types of workflows that we've all been talking about, but it won't completely prevent you from kind of doing something that's an anti-pattern. So some challenges that organizations have is if they're kind of stuck in the mindset of maybe they have a lot of work that's using SQL stored procedures, or they're coming from a different tool or different kind of approach. Trying to shoehorn exactly that code into DBT is not a good way to be set up for long-term success. It might work, but it's not as scalable. So some of the things that John's talking about, having a framework and an approach to designing the DBT project, the way Analytics 8 does, is really helpful to help kind of take maybe existing code and processes and then break that down into more modular code and designed in a way that's really that will really work well with the DBT approach.
Cool, thank you. We have another question. How do you control CDC in DBT?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So DBT has a feature called snapshots, and it's essentially like a native way to set up a type 2 dimension. So they change the dimension, and you configure your key, any columns you want to look at for updates or whatnot, and then DBT will actually stick some timestamps onto that table when it's materialized to tell you, when that record was updated, and so you can use those to keep track of any changes. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward setup.
Yeah, just to add, it also retains history. So once, if a record is changed, a new record will be added, and you'll have kind of like a DBT valid from, valid to for when the previous record was valid, and then the new record with those changes reflected.
Awesome. Okay, we don't have any for now, but if anyone on the call has questions, please feel free to follow up with us. We'll get questions routed to the right person. You can also reach out to any of the speakers on LinkedIn, if that's your preferred communication method. So thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you for the speakers. You guys did a great job. It was very valuable. We will be sending the recording out later this afternoon. And for other resources about data and analytics in general, We have a newsletter that I would encourage everyone to sign up for. It's called The Insider. You can sign up for it on our website. And again, our speakers and also key members of our executive team at Analytics 8 are pretty active on LinkedIn. So they're posting regularly about things that are happening in the industry, tech, and just general good insights and tips. So that concludes our session for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great day. Bye.